Within the hour, every person in that boardroom would stand when he walked in. But at 8:47 on a Tuesday morning, the woman behind the front desk of Hargrove and Sutcliffe Financial looked at Leonard Carter the way people look at someone who has wandered into the wrong building. He had by most appearances done exactly that. Leonard wore a jacket that had seen better decades. The collar of his flannel shirt sat slightly uneven, the way it does when a man dresses without a mirror. He carried no briefcase, no portfolio, no lanyard. He carried a single manila envelope, slightly creased, held loosely at his side the way a person carries something they don't need to protect because they already know what's in it. The lobby of Hargrove and Sutcliffe occupied the entire ground floor of a glass tower on Bay Street in Toronto. The reception desk was a slab of pale marble that stretched wide enough to suggest that whatever happened beyond it required permission, process, and the right kind of shoes. The carpet was the color of charcoal. The ambient lighting was warm in the deliberate way that expensive things are warm, designed to feel welcoming while making absolutely clear that not everyone was welcome. Leonard walked to the desk and waited. The woman behind it, whose name badge read Courtney Fielding, was on a call. She held up one finger without looking at him. Not rude, exactly. Efficient in the way that efficiency can sometimes feel like dismissal. Leonard waited. He looked at the artwork on the far wall, an abstract print, cool blues and fractured geometries, and his expression gave nothing away. A minute passed. Then another. Courtney Fielding ended her call and looked at him properly for the first time. "Good morning," she said. "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't," Leonard said. His voice was level and unhurried. "I'm here to see Patrick Aldridge." Something shifted in Courtney's face. Not dramatic, just a small recalibration, the kind that happens when a name is larger than the situation seems to warrant. "Mr. Aldridge," she said, "he's in meetings all morning. Do you have a scheduled time with his office?" "I don't," Leonard said again, in the same tone. "I see." She pulled her keyboard slightly closer. "And Leonard Carter." She typed it. Waited. Looked at the screen. Typed something else. The expression that followed was the particular expression of someone who has searched for a name and found nothing, and has now decided what that means. "I'm not seeing you in the system, Mr. Carter. Mr. Aldridge's calendar is quite full this week. If you'd like, I can connect you with his executive assistant and they can arrange something for next." "Could you call up to his office," Leonard said, "and let them know I'm here?" Courtney Fielding smiled the smile of someone who has said no 100 times and learned to make it look like helpfulness. "I'd be happy to pass along a message, but without an appointment I really can't. His direct line is 416-882-3301, Leonard said. "Extension 14. If you'd prefer, you can use that. Tell him Leonard Carter is in the lobby. He'll know." There was a pause. Courtney looked at him again, not with hostility, but with the focused attention of someone revising a first impression without yet knowing in which direction. "Just a moment," she said. She picked up the handset and dialed. Leonard turned slightly and looked at the lobby again. A young man in a dark suit was coming through the revolving door, coffee in hand, earpiece in, already reading something on his phone. A courier dropped a parcel at a side desk and left without speaking. The building moved the way all large financial buildings move in the morning, purposeful, sealed, self-sufficient. Leonard heard Courtney say something quietly into the phone. Then a pause. Then something else he couldn't make out. Then she set the handset down. "Mr. Carter," she said, and her voice had changed in the way that voices change when information has rearranged a situation. "Someone from Miss Aldridge's office will be down shortly. If you'd like to take a seat." "I'm fine here," Leonard said. He stood where he was, envelope at his side, and waited. What Courtney Fielding didn't know, and what most people in that building didn't know, was that Leonard Carter had helped build it. Not the physical building that had been there long before him, but the division that occupied floors 22 through 27, the infrastructure advisory group that had grown in 12 years from 11 people to just over 300, the client relationships that represented nearly 40% of the firm's managed assets. That was, in no small and frequently unacknowledged way, Leonard's. He had come to Hargrove and Sutcliffe in the early years of the firm's expansion, when Patrick Aldridge was still a managing director with ambitions and a reputation for surrounding himself with people who were smarter than the room expected. Leonard had been 38. He had spent the previous decade in municipal infrastructure finance, not glamorous, not visible, but deeply technical and, for those who understood it, deeply consequential. He knew how public capital moved. He knew where the gaps were. He knew how to find the patient money and match it with the long horizon projects that no one wanted to touch until someone proved they weren't as risky as they looked. Patrick had seen that immediately. He had brought Leonard in not as a salesman, not as a rainmaker in the conventional sense, but as the person who built the architecture that other people's rainmaking ran through. Leonard had taken the role quietly and done it without needing anyone to notice. For a long time that had been fine. The problem, if it could be called that simply, was that it eventually stopped being fine, not with a rupture, not with a confrontation. It happened the way many things happen inside large organizations, gradually, through accumulation, through the slow reweighting of credit and visibility, until one day a person who had built something essential found themselves standing outside their own work, unnamed in the presentations, untagged in the releases, footnoted or missing entirely. Leonard had watched it for 3 years. He had said nothing that was said loudly. The envelope under his arm contained, among other things, a letter of resignation, a summary of 7 specific matters he believed required the board's attention before he left, and a single piece of paper with a name on it, the name of a competing firm that had been quietly negotiating with him for 4 months. An offer that was generous in ways Hargrove and Sutcliffe had never been, including a clause that he had not yet decided whether to exercise, the right to bring his team, 41 people across 4 departments who had, over the past year, been asked by various means, some direct, some casual, whether they would follow Leonard Carter wherever he was going next. 38 of them had said yes. He had not told anyone at Hargrove and Sutcliffe any of this. He had come this morning without an appointment, because he had decided that Patrick Aldridge deserved the courtesy of hearing it first, in person from him. That was not generosity. It was precision. Leonard Carter had always believed that how you ended something was as important as how you began it, and he intended to end this cleanly. The elevator opened. A woman in her late 30s crossed the lobby toward him. Her name was Sandra Osei, and she was Patrick Aldridge's chief of staff. She had met Leonard twice at firm functions, and she recognized him immediately, which told him that Patrick had briefed her before she came down. "Mr. Carter," she said, "Mr. Aldridge can see you now. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting." "No need," Leonard said. She gestured toward the elevator. He followed her. Courtney Fielding, behind her marble desk, watched them go. The elevator rose without speaking to floor 26. Sandra Osei stood slightly ahead of Leonard and did not attempt conversation beyond the perfunctory. She was good at her job, which meant she already understood that this was not a routine visit. She pressed the button for the 26th floor, not the 22nd where Leonard's own team worked, which told him that Patrick wanted to receive him upstairs, on his ground, not Leonard's. Fine. Leonard had expected that. The 26th floor was quieter than the floors below. Corner offices, glass walls that looked out over the lake on one side and the city on the other. Assistant pods arranged at intervals like checkpoints. Sandra walked him past 2 of them and knocked once on a closed door before opening it. Patrick Aldridge was standing when Leonard entered, which was not something Patrick did for everyone. He was 61, silver-haired, physically imposing in the way of men who have held authority long enough that it becomes posture. He was wearing a tie he'd loosened slightly, and his expression when he saw Leonard was the expression of a man who has been given 30 seconds to decide how to play a situation and has made a choice. He extended his hand. "Leonard," he said, "sit down." "I'll stand," Leonard said. "This won't take long." Patrick's hand remained extended for a beat, then dropped. He studied Leonard's face, and whatever he found there caused him to sit down himself behind his own desk, which was perhaps not the arrangement he'd intended. "All right," Patrick said. Leonard set the manila envelope on the desk. "The top document is my resignation," he said, "effective in 30 days per my contract. The pages behind it document 7 items I believe require board-level review before my departure. I've copied outside counsel on those independently." Patrick didn't touch the envelope. He looked at Leonard. "You've already contacted outside counsel," he said. It was not quite a question. "2 weeks ago," Leonard said. The silence in the room had a particular quality. Patrick Aldridge had built his career on reading the room. What he was reading now, Leonard suspected, was not the situation he had prepared for. "Leonard," his voice shifted, lower, slower, "whatever issues you feel have been. This isn't about feelings, Patrick." Leonard's voice stayed the same throughout, the same weight, the same pace. "This is about 4 years of attribution that didn't happen. 2 restructurings where my division's work was absorbed into other reporting lines, and 1 client retention event last spring that was presented to the board with my name nowhere in the materials. I documented all 3. It's in the envelope. Those decisions were made at a level that I know where they were made." Another pause. Patrick looked at the envelope for the first time. Then he looked up. "You said board-level review," he said. "You're aware that Gregory Holt is the board chair?" "Yes. I've already been in contact with his office." That landed. Patrick's expression didn't collapse. He was too experienced for that. But something behind it shifted quietly and irrevocably, like a shelf settling under weight. "When?" Patrick said. "Last Friday." Patrick sat very still. "And the offer," he said. "There's an offer. There is from Meridian Infrastructure Advisors." Another name that was larger than the room expected. Patrick knew Meridian. Everyone in this industry knew Meridian. They had been quiet for years, building something, and no one in the market had quite seen the shape of what they were building until now. "They've offered you a seat," Patrick said. "Not a question now. A calculation. A partnership," Leonard said. "Effective 1st of next month if I choose to accelerate, and your team." "That's in the separate document," Leonard said. Third page. Patrick reached for the envelope. He opened it. He read, not quickly. Leonard watched him without expression. At one point, Patrick stopped on a page for longer than the others, and something in his jaw changed in the way that things change when a number is larger than expected. He set the pages down. 38 people, he said. 38, Leonard confirmed. The room was very quiet. Patrick Aldridge was not a man who said things he didn't mean, and so what he said next was measured and, Leonard believed, genuine. "I made a mistake," he said. "More than one. I think you know that I know that." "I do," Leonard said. "Is there anything?" Patrick stopped himself, started differently. "What would it take?" Leonard looked at him for a moment. He had thought about this question for weeks, had turned it from every angle, had gone back and forth about whether there was an answer he trusted. He had eventually concluded that there was not because Patrick was dishonest, but because the conditions that had produced those years were structural, embedded in how the firm assigned credit, how it reported to clients, how it thought about the difference between builders and faces. Patrick could change a culture statement. He could not change a culture. Nothing. I don't say that bitterly. I'm telling you the truth. There's nothing. I think this firm will be fine. I think it'll do well without me. And I think you should spend the next 30 days talking to your remaining team leads about what they need, because some of them have the same questions I had, and they're younger, and they'll wait longer to ask them. Patrick was quiet for a long moment. "You came in person," he said finally, "without an appointment. You could have sent this. I could have," Leonard said. "Why didn't you?" Leonard picked up the envelope, or rather the portion of it Patrick had set back on the desk, and tucked the empty folder under his arm. "Because you gave me the opportunity 12 years ago when you didn't have to. That deserved a conversation." Patrick stood. Not deliberately, not as a gesture. He simply rose, the way a person rises when they understand that something has ended and the posture of sitting no longer makes sense. "Leonard," he said. Leonard stopped. "Tell Meridian." Patrick seemed to consider what he wanted to say. "Tell them they got someone good." Leonard nodded once. Then he opened the door and walked out. Sandra Osei was at her desk when he came through. She stood slightly, that reflexive professional acknowledgement, and Leonard noticed that she did not look surprised. Whatever had happened behind that door, she had anticipated the general shape of it. She was, as he had thought, very good at her job. "I'll see myself out," he said. "Of course," she said. He walked past the assistant pods, past the corner glass looking over the gray-green surface of Lake Ontario, into the elevator. On the way down, he thought about nothing in particular. That was not numbness. Leonard Carter had never been numb to things he cared about. It was completion. The particular quiet of a decision fully made and fully executed. The elevator opened on the ground floor. He crossed the lobby. Courtney Fielding looked up from her desk as he passed, not with recognition, not with curiosity, but with the polite regard of someone cataloging who is coming and going. He pushed through the revolving glass door into the October air on Bay Street. It was colder than it had been when he came in. The lake wind came up the corridor between the towers and pushed against him, and he turned up his jacket collar and walked. The boardroom met at 2 o'clock that afternoon. Leonard was not present for it. He was, at that hour, in a conference room on the 14th floor of a different building 6 blocks south, reviewing onboarding materials with a woman named Claire Fontaine, who would be his operational partner at Meridian. She had a precise, methodical way of working that reminded him of the early years at Hargrove and Sutcliffe, before the machinery got too large and the credit got too diffuse. What he would learn later, from one of the 38, a portfolio analyst named Stuart Bolak, who had a friend still inside, was what had happened at 2 o'clock. Patrick Aldridge had called the meeting himself. He had presented the situation to the board plainly, without embellishment, without finding language that softened his own role in it. He had read from the third page of Leonard's document, the one that listed the 38 names, aloud, and then he had set it down. He had said, according to Stewart's account, "We did not see clearly. We saw what we expected to see. We need to talk about what that cost us, and more importantly, what it's going to cost us." The board chair, Gregory Holt, had already received Leonard's documents. He asked 3 questions, all specific, all pointed. Patrick answered them. At the end of the meeting, Gregory Holt had said something that Stewart's source couldn't get word for word but remembered the substance of, that the firm had let its most significant infrastructure relationship walk out the front door that morning because it had confused visibility with value. The meeting had lasted 40 minutes. Before it ended, a motion was made, procedurally unremarkable, to commission an internal review of attribution practices across all senior advisory roles. It passed without opposition. Leonard received a message from Patrick Aldridge at 4:18 that afternoon. It was brief. "I spoke to the board. What I should have done some time ago. I hope Meridian treats you the way this firm should have. I mean that." Leonard read it once. He put his phone in his jacket pocket and turned back to the onboarding materials. He did not reply that evening. He would eventually, when he had the right words. He was not a man who sent messages before he had the right words. 3 weeks later, Leonard Carter's last day at Hargrove and Sutcliffe passed quietly. He had spent those weeks in a kind of parallel state, present, professional, available, doing the work of transition with the same care he had brought to everything else. He briefed the colleagues who were staying. He made introductions. He declined 2 send-off lunches and accepted one, organized not by the firm but by the 38 themselves, at a restaurant on King Street that one of them had chosen because it was loud enough that no one had to be serious. It was a good evening. There was noise and there was food, and there was the particular laughter that happens when a group of people who have worked closely together know that the chapter is closing and decide, without discussion, to close it well. He walked home that night from King Street because the evening was clear enough for it. The streets were still wet from afternoon rain, and the light from the restaurants and bars landed in the puddles and fractured into something that was almost colorful. He thought about 12 years. He thought about what he had built and what it had cost, and whether the accounting balanced. He decided it did, on balance, in the ways that mattered. The first morning at Meridian, he was at his desk at 7:52. Claire Fontaine arrived at 8 and brought 2 coffees from the place downstairs, which he did not expect, and set one on his desk without comment. "Ready?" she said. "Yes," he said. And he was.